to live across all Oilers Nation social channels, not Instagram, Facebook, Twitter, YouTube, and Twitch. We got the three amigos here today, the regular crew from State of the Nation, except for Tyler Uremchuk because he's off doing other things, aka on the radio. So we got the Danalytic, we got Zach Lang coming to you. Zach wrote last night's post-game article. Zach just let us know it's doing numbers right now. So if you haven't checked that out yet, go check out Zach Lang's post-game article, OilersNation.com. And with that, fellas, we need to discuss last night. Oilers now down 3-0 against the Winnipeg Jets following last night's utter collapse with 9 minutes left in the third period. And Dan, I'll start with you. Looking at this team, let's look outside of the final 10 minutes and let's look at the positives that we saw from the first 50 minutes of that game. What did you like from the Oilers?
Well, it's a whole series thing for me. This team hasn't looked that bad overall. And, had a great start to the game, the exact start you needed. Leon Draisaitl wakes up and puts 2 goals in early. And, even when the Jets got that goal back, it didn't feel like doom and gloom. It felt good. It was enjoyable for 2 periods. And, I keep coming back to it and I keep going back to that but we've lost 2 one-goal games, and last night's was a 1-goal game as well. So, we're still alive. We still have games to play. Until they shake the hands, there's no sense in being too down on it. Sure, maybe you were right at the start of the year when, and I'm not talking about anybody in this room, but maybe you, the viewer, was right at the start of the year when we shouldn't have signed Mike Smith. Or maybe you were right when we didn't have enough depth in the forward core to make magic happen. Who knows? Let's not do that time right now. It's time to be positive. It's time to enjoy things. We got a game 4 right now. We're getting prepped for it. We're getting excited for it. But like Josh said, let's look at the positives and recap the breakdown as well.
Zach, we'll touch on the collapse in just a few minutes here. I want to look at you and say, okay, who's some of the Oilers that we saw positivity from last night? There was a couple of players that all of a sudden seemed like they were more engaged. I look at a guy like Zach Cassidy, and I thought, obviously he scores that big goal, but I thought he was the most engaged we've seen out of him so far, I would say in the last probably 2 or 3 months. And then, Jujhar Khaira, with the exception of a couple bad plays in which he was on the ice for a goal against, I thought he had a great game as well. Was there anyone that you looked at and thought they were a difference maker in that game and kind of turned the tide?
Yeah, I thought both of those guys were big difference makers. I thought the second line, Ryan McLeod, Nugent, Hopkins, and Cassidy looked really strong together. We've seen McLeod really take some strides in his game, and he still had a few questionable mistakes last night, but I thought he played solid. He looked good in that role. Zach Cassian, it was the game that Zach Cassian needed, and the game that we've needed from him for so long now. Obviously, this season has been nothing short of a big disappointment. And I thought Slater Cuckoo and Tyson Barrie did a hell of a job on the third pairing last night. As I yawned because I'm still exhausted. I thought they did a fine job on the third pairing last night. They controlled the expected goal share and the shot share really well on the ice. Ethan Bear looked solid in the top pairing again. It was a night where a lot of things went right. And hey, Leon Draisaitl and McDavid broke through, right? It was what the Oilers were looking for. It was what the Oilers needed. And they delivered with, 2 quick goals in the first 10 minutes from Draisaitl. That really set the tempo for the first 50 minutes of that game. So there's a lot of positives to look at, not only just from the game, but I think from the series as a whole.
Let's talk about the defensive pairings, because we saw some completely new combos, some new pairings from Dave Tippett going into last night's game, and he stuck with them throughout the duration of the entire evening. Zach, you touched on the Kukuk and the Barrie pairing, and I'll 100% agree. I thought they were the best pairing on the ice for either team. I thought the Barrie and Kukuk pairing had a great game. I don't want to say sheltered minutes for Tyson Barrie, but you like him being up and you like him being a part of the offensive game, which means you got to get him on the ice with the McDavid line. But at the same time, I thought Barrie had one of his best games we've seen in a long time. And I don't want to use the term sheltered role or sheltered minutes necessarily, because then that takes Ethan Bear out of his role. And I'll actually play the devil's advocate on this one. I thought Ethan Bear struggled last night. I thought he had one of the worst games I've seen out of him in a long time. That looked like the Ethan Bear we saw earlier in the season. He couldn't make a breakout pass. I don't know how many times he just kind of panicked and the puck was a grenade on his stick along the boards. I made a tweet following last night's game that I don't know if I 100% stand by it, but I said I would take Ethan Bear out of the lineup for tonight's game and I would put Evan Bouchard in because that's the performance I saw out of him. You know, it was obviously elevated minutes with Darnell Nurse, but it was him and Kulikov that were the issue for me on the back end. And Zach, I'll give you a chance to respond here, but Dan, I'll go to you. When you looked at those combos last night, what did you think about the Barry and the Bear, swap? And what'd you think of both of their games? And then we'll touch on Kulikov as well.
Well, I think when you look at the first two games, you can see why Tippett was inclined to give Bear more minutes. And I think that, you know, a lot of our team has excelled with less minutes on the ice. You know, less time to make mistakes, more time to make an impact in a quick little burst. So, yeah, I mean, when you're the top pairing, for me, I don't expect you to be perfect. And yes, you hopefully are, but yeah, I don't know. I get it. I get where you're coming from. I hear what you're saying, but for me, you know, for Tippett especially, you know, you look back and you say, well, he saw something in Bear that he wasn't necessarily getting from the top guys in the first two games, so he gave him a shot up there. Maybe it doesn't stay that way for game 4, but it's the same thing with the Kassian conversation. All before the game, a lot of Oiler fans were ripping on Tippett for putting Kassian up there. And at the end of the day, he didn't look that bad. He didn't look out of place. He certainly had his best game as an Oiler this playoff run.
Yeah.
So, you know, the Twitter GM, and I'm not saying that you guys are Twitter GMing, but you know, those kinds of questions, when you look back on them, you have to understand where the decision came from as well as the result. And you're not wrong to say that Bear had a tough game. I don't know if we necessarily need to sit him. Maybe he's not playing top pairing minutes tonight, though.
Sure. Zach?
I mean, I didn't have a problem with Ethan Bear on the top pairing. I thought he had a solid game. Dave Tippett, too, thought he had a good game. He was asked last night in his post-game press conference about Bear on the top pairing. Tippett said, quote, "I thought Bear was fine there. Bear played a real strong game, especially in the first period. He was real strong." So, obviously, he felt he played a real strong game. So
that's interesting.
Yeah, it was interesting. You know, the pairing, they controlled the expected goal share really well. I mean, it was about 49-50%. They got a little bit caved in terms of the shot attempts, but you know, they were also going up against the elites of the Winnipeg Jets. So not a massive surprise there, especially late in the game when the Jets were really pushing hard. You know, I think there was a lot to like about the game, and obviously, you know, the Josh Archibald penalty is really what changed the game. You know, you hate to single out a player or a certain scenario, but that was a dumb, reckless penalty for him to take. There's no other way to chop it up, right? You know, he almost got his eye gouged out. Well, he almost got his eye gouged out 2-3 minutes before. You know, the Oilers are up 4-1. You think the game's in the bag at that point. So, you know, he gets a little reckless and takes a run at somebody. And, you know, it's Logan Stanley, and they end up on the power play, they score, and the rest is history, right? So, you know, it's not solely on him. You know, the team needs to do a better job of killing that penalty, of not absolutely imploding here in the dying minutes of the game. But that one stung quite a bit, to say the least, I think.
Well, in defense of Josh Archibald, and you're absolutely right. It does hang on him. It sucks that it hangs on him, but it is what it is. When you look back at it, like you said, he just got tanked by a guy that Stanley just has been running around doing whatever he wants to the Oilers this whole time. And if you're thinking of as your Archibald, this team kills penalties like it's a joke. They haven't allowed a power play goal in 12 games prior to the last night. So, you know, you're confident in your penalty killers. Of course, you are one of the penalty killers, so that's a tough position to be in. But you know, for them, if they came out and killed that penalty, that's a demoralizing moment, right? That's something where Josh Archibald can do what he wants to you. We'll kill the penalty off and move on, you know? So yeah, I don't know. It's, you play with fire and sometimes you get burned.
Yeah.
And it sucks that he got burned.
Yeah, I'm going to agree with Dan. I I didn't like the penalty. It's tough. It's tough to take that penalty in that time of the game, in that situation. Did Josh Archibald, when he took that penalty, could he have any sort of idea, or could he ever predict that they were going to blow that 3-goal lead with 9 minutes left? No. And obviously that's never your intent. But I have a tough time pinning this because, and Zach, I don't think you're doing this at all, but I'm seeing a lot of people in the mainstream, you know, and that's the first thing that they're going to is, okay, Josh Archibald lost the Oilers that game by taking that stupid penalty with 9 minutes left. And I think that if you're a good playoff team, it doesn't matter if the other team has 4 power plays in the last 9 minutes. You don't blow a 3-goal lead, send it to overtime, and then lose. You just don't.
Yep.
It's unacceptable. So, you know, I don't like the penalty from Archibald, but at the same time, you know, he was fired up. He took a stick in the eye a couple of seconds earlier, or a couple minutes earlier, and it almost felt like a thing where, listen, I can't read into it, and I have no idea what Josh Archibald was thinking in that moment, but part of me also like almost thinks that Josh Archibald was like, you know what, we're up 4-1, there's 9 minutes left in this game, I just about got my eye stabbed out, I'm gonna go take a run at their biggest guy here and just send a message that, you know, we're here, we're up 4-1 right now, and we're here to play. But obviously now, looking back on it, you're like, oh, wow, okay, was it worth it? Obviously not. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Well, and in that situation too, and I get it, it is a penalty. What he did is a penalty. But is the fact that he's just that much smaller than Logan Stanley, should Logan Stanley not have to come down to that hit too? You know what I mean? Like that becomes a size issue for me. But anyways, it's not, like I said, it's a penalty.
It's a weird scenario, right?
Yeah.
You know, you got 5'10" Josh Archibald trying to lay a big hit on 6'7" Logan Stanley. I mean,
Stanley was coming in for a hit too. Stanley was coming in for a hit too, and if he connected with Archibald's head, he probably wouldn't have been punished for that.
The problem.
So I'm watching the clip again here. I tweeted it out last night, and Archibald is literally going to duck under, like goes to hit him, and he ducks underneath Logan Stanley's stick.
Yeah.
To come in and lay the hit, right? So, you know, Archibald is probably thinking, I don't want to get my eye gouged out again here by a stick, and tries to come in low on him, right?
Yeah.
You know, it is what it is. It is what it is, right? And again, you know, you don't want to solely pin it on Archibald because it's not solely his fault. It's the entire team's fault. You know, the fact that they let go of a 4-1 lead in the final 8 minutes of the game and became the laughing stock of Twitter last night. You know, like it's a hard situation, and you know, for me, it ranks up there with one of the toughest Oiler losses that I think I've seen, just in terms of a single game perspective. I mean, look, 10 times. It was the 10th time in playoff history that a team ever overcame a 3-0 deficit, or sorry, a 3-goal deficit in the final 10 minutes of the game. And 2 of the other times were the Oilers as well. And in 1982, in Game 5, they blew a lead against the LA Kings. Then a couple years ago, we all remember what happened in Anaheim. So yeah, it's a tough one for sure.
The Josh Archibald play almost reminded me of like a really small, undersized defensive back coming up trying to tackle like Saquon Barkley, just going right for the knees. Like it was a tough play to watch. Like I do think Archibald was in the wrong in that. Like it was yes, he's a smaller, undersized guy, but you can't necessarily duck down and try to take a guy out by just above his knees. You know what I mean?
That's like the thing, right? If he had ducked and avoided and just evaded and moved on from that situation, absolutely. Mm-hmm. But he caught his leg, and so it's a clipping penalty. It just is what it is.
It almost looked like he was trying to do it was like a hip check almost, but in the wrong direction. Yeah.
But Stanley is just way too big for that. So yeah, I don't know. It is what it is. But again, like you said, Josh, Zach isn't saying that it's on Archibald's head forever. It's just the reality of the situation is that's the linchpin that started the downfall, and you know, and then you get to overtime, and the Oilers had their chances. The Oilers had their shots, and it just didn't go in for them. That's a hell of a face-off win. That's a set play by Ehlers. Ehlers comes back in Game 3, does exactly what he needs from his team. So it is what it is, guys, and you know, I truly feel like, and this is me on my soapbox, I truly feel like we have an entire off season to be mad about this. We have a long off season. If tonight is the last night, or if Game 5 is the last night, Game 6, Game 7, whatever it is, if those are the last nights of our season, we have a long time to break this down. right now, why not be happy? Why not go for the reverse sweep? Why not? It's as good of a time as any. Zach, you wrote an article about this morning. You know, the teams that have done the reverse sweep before. Why not have us be that next one? Why not?
That's right. So, sorry, go ahead, Josh.
No, go ahead, Zach. Go ahead.
I was just going to dive into the article a little bit. It's happened 4 times in NHL history. The first time it ever happened was the 1942 Stanley Cup Finals. The Toronto Maple Leafs came back down 3-0 against the Detroit Red Wings. Second time was in the Stanley Cup quarterfinals. The New York Islanders came back from a 3-0 deficit. And then twice in the last 11 years it's happened. In 2010, we saw the Philadelphia Flyers come back against the Boston Bruins in the Eastern Conference semifinals. And then in 2014, we saw the LA Kings do it against the San Jose Sharks. So, you know, in most of those, what you saw was, you know, the team coming back, got early leads and they held on to them and they didn't blow them and they put games away. And, you know, it's something we've seen the Edmonton Oilers do all season long. All year long, we saw them put teams away. All year long, we saw them win games just like they were looking like they were going to last night. So this is a team that knows how to do it and that sort of a thing. So, you know, I think if the Oilers can come out here even tonight with a lot of jump and play the way they did in the first period last night, you know, it could be another one of those games where, you know, the Oilers are able to put up an early lead and hold on to it. And that's really what they need to do.
It's another edition of State of the Nation. We're breaking down last night's 5-4 loss for the Edmonton Oilers. Obviously, they play again tonight, second half of the back-to-back. We will break down tonight's game in just a second here. But first of all, fellas, there's one other thing I want to touch on before we chat Game 4 tonight in Winnipeg, 7:45 puck drop. Connor McDavid. We're 3 games into the series. McDavid currently sits at, I believe, 0 goals, 3 assists. And a lot of people are wondering, you know, when is the best player in the world going to start taking over some of these games? You know, we saw a great first period performance from him in that line last night with him and Draisaitl playing together. And yes, it was a I would say a casual 3-assist night for Connor McDavid, but I don't know if we've necessarily seen McDavid do McDavid things yet where he simply takes over a game and makes it his own. And, you know, we're looking at a guy like Nate McKinnon out in Colorado. His Colorado Avalanche just swept the St. Louis Blues. He had 6 goals in 4 games, 3 assists. And if you're Connor McDavid, I assume you look yourself in the mirror going into Game 4 here and think, I have not been good enough. And Zach, I'll start with you on this one. McDavid hasn't been good enough. And what are you seeing out of his game that makes you wonder what's going on? And do you think there's enough time for him to turn it around and help lead this team to hopefully a comeback in this series?
Rumors of Connor McDavid's demise are greatly exaggerated in my eyes. Really, I mean, Connor McDavid is still the best player in the world. Mm-hmm. Connor McDavid has been hooked, held, slashed, interfered with, pulled down, punched, shoved, literally anything Winnipeg. Like, even last night, there was one clip, Josh, where I watched McDavid enter the zone, and he literally had 3 Winnipeg players on him. He is drawing the Winnipeg game plan is to shut down Connor McDavid. Yeah. And they're for the most part successfully doing so. You know, don't forget that Connor McDavid has had his looks too. Like it's not like he's been quiet this whole series. You know, I think this is more of a situation of the Winnipeg Jets are just playing really tight defensive hockey and making it hard for the Oilers to struggle. Making it hard for the Oilers to break through offensively. You know, I don't think that Connor McDavid, in any sense of the term, is an issue or a problem or anything like that for the Oilers. Obviously, you'd love to see him stepping up and scoring 7 points in 2 games like Nate McKinnon did. And McDavid did that all year long, right? He put up, 2.5 points per game, 2 points per game against the Winnipeg Jets. You know, I think there's more of an issue in the rest of the Oilers lineup, and there's more glaring holes that are being shown here. Mm-hmm. You know, when McDavid and Draisaitl get shut down, you know, where's the rest of the Oilers, right? Ryan Nugent Hopkins, where are you, man? I mean, he struggled to break through offensively as well, but he's still getting chances too. You know, where's the depth scoring from the bottom 6? Thankfully, last night, you know, they were able to chip in with a goal or 2. But, you know, there's much bigger questions that need to be asked of this Oilers organization and franchise as a whole, more than, hey, Connor, where are you in these playoffs?
Dan, I'll come to you in a second here. One thing I will say, Zach, is I agree. I wouldn't say that McDavid has been necessarily an issue in the series so far. I just think that as Oilers fans, we are allowed to and we should have the highest expectations out of 97 because of the player that he is and because of what we've seen on him all season long. You know, he absolutely dominated the Winnipeg Jets in the regular season. Like, I'm talking dominated. More than any player in the entire league dominated a team. So the only issue I have is, yes, he's not playing bad. He's getting his looks, and that's a good sign. But when you're the best player on your team and the best player on the ice night in, night out, you just wish that there would be a second where he could take over the game and not let it come to an issue where you're looking at the bottom six and wondering, you know, where are they going to step up? You know, when you are the best player in the game, you just want him to take over the game. Which you can't expect him to do that every single night, but you're just as an Oilers fan, because you know he can, right, Zach? Like, you know he can. He's done it so many times. You just wish that, you know, going into overtime, there's a lot of people that were saying, like, this is McDavid's opportunity. Just take over the game. Don't allow it to fall into the hands of anyone else on the ice. Be Connor McDavid. And Dan, that's the only thing that I look at Connor McDavid's game that I haven't seen out of so far in this series. Just the inability to just completely take over the game.
Yeah, and I think that it's not an unfair question to ask, but the equation still is, you know, the Winnipeg Jets are also in that math, right? And the Winnipeg Jets have played a pretty perfect game when it comes to shutting down Leon Draisaitl and Connor McDavid. Except for one period last night, they've really done a good job of keying in on those guys. And it harkens back to the 1990s and the 2000s when teams would just put shutdown lines out there. The Jets top guys are really effective shutdown guys. Blake Wheeler, really good shutdown guy. Scheifele plays really well defensively. Like, those guys are sound defensive players, and now they got the Dubois and the Ehlers to put that offensive side into things. So, you know, you can't take anything away from the Winnipeg Jets. They have hung around for 2 games. They hung around, you know, with the 2 best players in the league, shut them down, made us the rest of the team do something. And, you know, you talk about things that were going well in the regular season. What about our defense? Our defense scored second most goals of any defensive core in the league. You know, and they haven't chipped in. I'm not saying, again, it's not on any one level of this team that we have issues. But the positives that we take away, and we kind of circle back to what we started talking about on this show, on this episode, is that bottom 6 looked as good as it has this entire playoffs.
Agreed.
I expect them to get a couple more goals tonight. I expect them to chip in and hold the Scheifele line down in their own end for a shift or 2 a game. You know, like we've been having with. That's the big thing that I've seen with the McDavid Draisaitl line, is that they're playing entire shifts at our end. They're not able to get the puck out, whether it's the defense, whether it's them. I'm not sure what the issue is there, but they're not able to get out of our end. Our bottom 6 last night was able to hem the Jets in. So just for me, it's you know, we like you said, Zach, those teams that did the reverse sweep, they get up early in games. We did that last night, and then they hold on to the lead. We didn't do that last night. I guarantee you give the Oilers an opportunity again tonight to be up 3 goals going into the third period. We're not losing that game. It's just not happening.
Yeah.
They don't make those kinds of mistakes again. You don't have that kind of a collapse again. And if you do, then there's wholesale changes in the offseason. But we still have a game tonight. We still have something to look forward to tonight, and there's a lot of positives. The defense hasn't scored a goal yet. Why not tonight? Why not score a couple goals tonight from the defense? So there's lots of things to look forward to.
Before we start breaking down tonight's game for a few minutes here, we're just wrapping up on State of the Nation. I think that 4th line is very fascinating. It's very interesting to me because they're not obviously a traditional 4th line, especially in the Dave Tippett mold. Because if we know anything about Dave Tippett, he likes big bodies in the bottom 6 that can kill penalties and just kind of swing momentum in your direction by just getting in on the forecheck. Or not necessarily even getting in on the forecheck, but just running other teams down. But that 4th line, and Jay and I talked about this on the pregame show yesterday, that 4th line is like almost your second line, because that's the second most skilled line you have if you're icing that lineup. The fourth line is the second most skilled line you have. Yamamoto, Haas, and Tyler Ennis are so undersized, but I thought they were very impressive last night. And Zach, I'll come to you on this to start because you usually have a good heartbeat on this kind of stuff. Dave Tippett is going to have an opportunity here tonight to switch some stuff up if he wants to, obviously, as any coach would going into a new game. I personally, I don't know if they've gotten out for the morning skate yet. I assume not because it's a 7:45 game, and I don't even know if they'll have a morning skate because it's back-to-back. But we'll have to wait and see what the lines for tonight are going to look like. I don't know, Zach, if I would necessarily change anything if I'm Dave Tippett. I would maybe swap Barry and Bear back and try it out at the beginning of the game and see what happens. But Zach, do you anticipate any changes from Dave Tippett? And if you were Dave Tippett, any changes you would make?
Yeah, no, I mean, if I'm Dave Tippett, I roll with the same lines and I roll with the same defensive pairings. Look, it got the Oilers 8 minutes away from winning game 3. So I don't think that in any sense of the term is anything broke in this scenario here. You know, the Oilers played a hell of a game all night last night, and they hung in there again until the final 8 minutes. So I would come back and roll the same lines. Honestly, I think they looked good. You know, I got some questions about the deployment of those lines. You know, why is a guy like Jujhar Khaira playing 3 minutes at even strength more than a guy like Ryan Nugent Hopkins?
He did play a lot.
Obviously,
he played a
lot, and obviously the guy, obviously that line was buzzing, as was most of the roster. But you know, there's some small coaching things in that sense of the term that you have to wonder about. And I hear Dan taking a big deep breath here about this one.
I have a question. I do have a question for you, Zach, because do you think that played? Do you think a factor of that was that we were up so big in a game 3 where we knew we had game 4 the next night? Like I feel like one of the things that we've had with this team is McDavid and Draisaitl are getting short shifted, which they haven't been short shifted the entire season. We haven't seen them doing 30-second shifts ever. Then yesterday when things were going well, that line was out for 2 shifts. And they get a goal off of it, and then it just kind of snowballed from there. I think that you're absolutely right. I think that there was a usage issue there, but I think it's because they were trying to plan for game 2 or game 4, maybe looking ahead a little bit early, and so you had your bottom 6, which was buzzing. So there's a factor there, right? You can trust them. You feel like you can trust them for the game, and then you might as well rest the big guns and get another big lead tomorrow night. I think that you're absolutely right though. You go back to the same lineup tonight, and you go back to the same game plan. Come out, balls busting right at the start, get a lead, and then you can start to game plan for game 6, kind of thing, game 5 and game 6. Like we're not done yet. We take this one game at a time. It's going to be fine. But yeah, I would be curious to know what your thoughts on that, Zach. Is it an usage issue, or are they just saving news for game 4?
I think it's a little bit of both. I mean, I think, at the end of the day, the Khaira line was out there. They scored the 4th goal, but they were also out there for 2 goals against last night at 5-on-5. So, what's the real push there? Are you looking to have guys that can bang there, or are you looking for guys that can help, in the score differential department? I've had questions about some of the big boys usage all year long, like a guy like Devin Shore. Like I've long wondered why he's consistently been in the lineup. There's nothing about his game to me besides a bit of physicality
penalties
that leads me to believe that he's a strong addition there on a regular basis over a guy like Tyler Ennis in the bottom 6. Ennis is a guy who's put up 30 points as a bottom 6 winger in the past. Obviously that's on a more grandiose scale. But I think in a situation like last night, it's maybe the fact that Ryan McLeod is on the line with Nugent Hopkins and Cassian. But then again, if that's your concern, then why wouldn't you be double shifting McDavid or Draisaitl with that line there if you wanted to get away from McLeod? So it just doesn't – I struggle to kind of see the rational thinking behind it. Obviously, I do think that there is some sense of it with maybe trying to to play a more strong defensive game with the Kyra line. That's really the only thing I could think of or try and point to.
Dave Tippett seemed to have an idea in his head last night, especially down the second stretch half of that game, that he was going to roll 4 lines, and he stuck with it. He rolled 4 lines at moments when, as an Oilers fan, you were probably hoping to see that top line swing over the boards and pot another one. It was the Caroline that came out. And Carey had a strong game, but you're not going to be able to roll 4 lines against this Jets team and expect to come out with a win. One other thing before we wrap up this show. Chris Kozak says, I'd change Bear and Kukuk out and put Russell and Bouchard in. Zach, do we know? I know that Chris Russell was a little bit banged up. Is he game ready, and would he be an option for the Oilers?
Honestly, I'm not sure. That's been a really interesting thing to watch here. I know he was working pretty hard at practice the other day with the taxi squad guys, so we could tell that he wasn't going to draw into the lineup last night. I have a hard time pulling a guy like Cuckoo out right now when you already pulled out Jones. Chris Russell hasn't played hockey in well over a month and a half at this point. So, Bouchard, yeah, maybe you could slide him in there. But again, I don't see Ethan Bear coming out of the lineup. I don't see Tyson Barrie coming out of the lineup. I don't see Adam Larson coming out of the lineup. So if Bouchard was to slide in, it would be on his offside, on the left side, and I just don't see that being a thing happening tonight.
Yeah,
7D, man.
Yeah, 7D.
I mean, that's
that would
an
be an
option
adventure
too, I suppose. It's a way you could go, allow for the bottom 6 to be doubled up a little bit more, with Josh Archibald more likely than not out of the lineup, because he's got a hearing with the NHL Department of Player Safety here today. So that's an option you could go with, but I have a hard time seeing that happening.
We're getting some mixed opinions here in the chat. I would say it's about a lot of people criticizing Bear, a lot of people saying he had a tough game, and then there's some people saying Bear wasn't the issue. A lot of people saying you can't pin it on Josh Archibald, but at the same time, took a bad penalty at a bad spot in the game. Fellas, it was a pleasure. We're in for one tonight. It's going to be exciting. The Oilers with an opportunity here to stretch out their season a little bit longer if they can figure out how to muster up a win here on the second half of a back-to-back in Winnipeg. Before we wrap it up, I want to turn to something on a little bit more of a positive note. Zach, I think I saw you tweeting about this yesterday. Did anyone see the scene on the 18th fairway at the Ocean Course yesterday when Lefty became the oldest player in history to win a major? Zach, what a moment that was, eh?
Yeah, it was beautiful. I'm a lefty myself, so
Phil
Mickelson's always been So Phil's always been a guy that I've idolized a little bit. So it was incredible to see what a picture, the crowd on 18 surrounding him as he's walking up. He put the shot off in a little bit of the rough and then threw an absolute dart onto the green. Yeah. It was incredible to see. It was incredible to see him steal that victory.
I'm a Dustin Johnson guy, and he missed the cut, but I'm also a big Brooks Koepka guy, and he was obviously down the stretch there battling with Lefty. And, part of me wanted Brooks to figure it out, but at the same time, being a part of history there and getting to see Lefty pull it out and have a great day, especially on the back nine, was remarkable. So, Dan, did you watch it all? You a golf guy?
I'm a big Mike Weir fan.
Mike Weir. Is Mike Weir?
He's on the senior tour.
Who's older? I know, but who's older? Is Mike Weir or Phil Mickelson older? I think Mike Weir's got to be older.
I think Weir is. They're pretty close though, because they came up. They kind of came up together.
Yeah.
He's the only lefty to me.
Yeah, Weir's got to be a little bit older. All right, fella, he's the only lefty to me. Yeah, when someone refers to lefty, Dan thinks of Mike Weir.
Mike Weir, every time. Hits me every time. Chokes me up.
Okay, I got to know this. Zach, before we wrapped it up, did you place any money on the PGA Championship?
Yeah, I took Phil live yesterday morning ahead of the round. I threw a couple bucks on it. So,
no way, that's awesome.
Yeah, I got him at decent little odds there. It was surprising because he had the 2-stroke lead heading into Sunday, and Koepka was still considered the favorite. So made a couple of shekels there on Lefty. So
good for you, brother. That's awesome. I know our guy Jay Downton actually placed a wager on Phil, I believe, on Saturday. So he would have had a good little cash out there as well. Fellas, it was a pleasure. Everyone enjoyed tonight's game. 7:45 puck drop. Oilers looking to take their first game off of Winnipeg and avoid the sweep tonight in Peg City. Enjoy the game. We will see you,
gentlemen. We got some breaking news. It sounds like Josh Archibald has been suspended 1 game for his clip on Logan Stanley. So Josh Archibald will not be in the lineup here tonight for the Edmonton Oilers.
Archibald out of the lineup and likely drawing back in because Archibald is a right-handed player, I believe. Yes.
Yeah.
And so he would be playing the right side. I would say
Chase on.
Is it going to be Chase on or would it be? It's not going to be James Neal. I don't think that's happening. It's got to be either Chase on or Cahoon. It's probably Chase on, eh?
Probably Chase on.
Probably Chase on. So look for Alex Chase on to be in the lineup tonight. Everyone enjoy the game. Josh Archibald suspended for 1 game. Won't be in the lineup tonight. Here's hoping we'll be back tomorrow on State of the Nation discussing the Oilers' victory tonight and how they will continue it on in game 2 or game